Hello, this is GeoTechLand, and today I'll be talking about why Linux is better than Windows. So of course this debate has been raging for years, and I honestly thought Windows had always had the upper edge, but especially lately I've been really having issues with Windows. And the very first thing I should mention is that the updates. So on Windows, when you boot up Windows, it automatically starts downloading, and with Windows 10, at least there's no easy way to switch it off. So it just starts downloading whenever it feels like it. So you're in the middle of something, maybe gaming, and you just start getting some lag. A lot of times it's because Windows is downloading something or trying to update itself, and to install the updates you got to restart and then reboot the computer, and while that's going on it's installing. So overall the update process is a very unpleasant experience, and it's really gotten a lot worse than ever before there. Whereas on Linux you can definitely always switch it off so that it doesn't automatically start downloading and start installing stuff on you. So it gives you that freedom there. And on the other hand, if you want most things that you actually download, you don't need to restart or reboot the computer. The only scenario where you need to reboot the computer is if there's an update to the kernel. And again, that doesn't force you to restart the computer either. And even when you do restart, it just loads the new kernel version. It doesn't have to wait like a few seconds or a few minutes sometimes for it to install whatever change it made. And so that's a huge advantage off the bat there. And the second advantage is that by default, Linux is a lot more secure than Windows. And I know there's two things with this, that on one hand, Linux is not as popular as Windows, so a lot of virus makers don't target Linux. But that's only half of it. The other half is that by default, Linux is a lot more secure. Normally, to change anything deep within the system, it needs admin privileges. And I know Windows has gotten a little bit better on that lately, but overall, Linux is still the more secure environment. And I may even say Linux is overall faster, in the sense that by default, a lot of programs that are running are actually pretty low on resources. Right now it's set kind of high because I have Firefox open and I'm obviously recording. But by default, the memory usage and the CPU usage is very low compared to Windows. And that's really because Windows is for profit, because it's trying to either gather your data, it's trying to or it wants you to use the voice assistant Cortana, but it has generally a lot of processes there and a lot of bloatware, because again it's a for-profit, so it wants you to use a lot of the programs that it wants you to use a lot of programs it recommends, so it's always going to suggest things to use. And so by default, Linux can be very lightweight. And typically the program I'm using, GNOME, is actually pretty much a resource hog compared to other Linux desktop environments. But that's the other thing with Linux, is that it gives you a lot of choice. You don't have to, if you don't like the layout of some interface, you can change it. Where on Windows, you're pretty much sticking to what they want to give you, and there's really not many ways to change it. So Linux has that customizability factor, and there are different flavors of Linux. So if you want something that's very lightweight and you don't care for how pretty it looks, you can use that. If you care more about looks, there's an option for that as well. Where in Windows 10, again, you have to stick with one thing. And the other reason Linux is better is that a lot of the basic software you use on Windows, you can pretty much use on Linux. So obviously the web browsers being the big ones, and for the average person, that's all they really need. If you're a student, you may need like an office suite, and Linux has LibreOffice. In a sense, it in many ways may be better than on Windows, because on Windows you do usually have to pay now, like a Microsoft Online, whereas LibreOffice is installed by default with pretty much most Linux OSs. And so this takes you kind of back to the usual way Windows would have, Microsoft Word installed, and you can just use it. You didn't have to be signed in online or have an online account. So this is in many ways better. Obviously, Microsoft Word and any of the rest of Windows Office Suite or Microsoft Office Suite may be better, like overall a better experience. I personally haven't really used them, so I can't really say, but if they are, that's the sort of trade-off. But I mean, if you just really want to do the basics, this should take care of it. You have Libreoffice Writer, and I think their PowerPoint equivalent is LibreOffice Impress. And again, I personally haven't used it, so but there's an option there, and there's always improvements made to it. So if you just need something basic, you're fine. You really only would need Microsoft solutions or Office Suite is if you needed to do something exclusive to those programs. But if you're just doing basic stuff, this should cover it. And of course, you got this is like the Notepad version of I guess this is the Notepad equivalent here. Now, installing software on Linux has always been really that you can, or at least these days, you can just open up a package manager or a software center. On this OS that I'm using, Manjaro Linux, it's not as pretty as a lot of others. So like Ubuntu has a nicer looking software center, and you can find a lot of apps to install. And something basic like Discord, you can get it on Linux. Steam, of course, you can install on Linux, and that's the only advantage Windows may still have, is that people make games for Windows only. But Linux has actually come a long way now. You can really get similar performance. Like if you play Rise of the Tomb Raider, which is available both on Linux and Windows, you get very comparable performance now. So it's not a matter of Linux can't run games. Now it's really just that no one's making games for Linux because not many people use it. A lot of pushback some people may have to switching to Linux is that no one wants to install Linux on a computer. And that's a fair point. I mean, Linux overall is still the superior experience now, but a lot of people don't switch to it because not a lot of popular laptop makers come with Linux and pre-installed. And there's two companies that do. Like if thinking of getting a new laptop and you want Linux pre-installed, and again you feel like this may be a good fit for you, you just need the basics, this may be okay. Now these are like fancier computers obviously, but if you need something low cost, there's the Pinebook here. I may not recommend this for a student, maybe for like a younger kid that just wants to play around with a computer, but even this will get you the same experience. But this particular computer is not as powerful. But the point being that there are computers that come pre-installed with Linux now, and like I said, part of it is because Linux is not trying to be for profit. I know there are some companies that use Linux that are for profit, but a lot of Linux OS distributions or distros, they're non-profit. You can donate to them, and obviously it's encouraged to donate to them, but you don't have to. You can still get the operating systems for free. But other than that, guys, that is pretty much it. Linux pretty much does everything better than Windows. Windows still only has the advantages that most people have it, and that's why people like game makers only target Windows and not Linux. Even though if they released a game on Linux, the performance would be very similar now to Windows. So if you feel like you just need the basics and you don't need any Windows only app, then I would recommend this. And I should also note too that there is also something called Wine. It's a layer that lets you run Windows programs. So even if you did have one Windows program that you really needed, if you wanted to get more experimental, you can test it out or watch videos to see if that program runs well on Linux. But yeah, even if you do have that Windows only program, you could probably run it on Linux. That's just the power of open source and nonprofit. So other than that, guys, thank you guys for watching. If you found the video helpful, please give it a like, share, subscribe, and I will see you guys next time.